So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is the Text Writers Colloquium. We've got, so Wayne Wold is leading us this evening, and we've got a few people that have submitted. Those that submitted some text for consideration are the panelists here, and I see we've also got some other people joining us as attendees. So if you are here as an attendee, you're welcome to use the chat function to engage as well. But yeah, Wayne will be looking at some of these texts that have been submitted and sharing some feedback. So a little bit about Wayne. So Wayne Wold serves as professor, college organist, and chair of the music department at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, and director of music ministry at First Lutheran Church in Ellicott City, Maryland. An active composer, author, performer, church musician, and clinician, he holds a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from Shenandoah Conservatory in Winchester, Virginia, a Master of Sacred Music degree from Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio, and a Bachelor of Music degree from Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. He earned the certification of AAGO and received the Alumnus of Excellence Award in 2015 from Shenandoah Conservatory. He is editor and frequent author of a monthly column entitled Musicians on the Side in the Journal of the American Organist. He's the author of 3 books, numerous articles, and dozens of anthem and hymn texts. His published compositions number over 300 and include works for organ, adult and children's choirs, and various instrumental ensembles, plus the children's musical and psalm settings and hymn tunes that appear in numerous hymnals in the US and Australia. He served on the editorial committee for the hymnal Evangelical Lutheran Worship. His hymn texts have won contests sponsored by Eastman School of Music, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and the Association of Lutheran Church Musicians. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wayne to get us started.
Oh, well, thank you, Steve. Great. Greetings to all. And even though I had a little glitch this evening, I'm so thankful for the technology that allows this to happen, for us to meet this way. I'm fully aware it's not the same as being together, of course. I was so looking forward to meeting together in Atlanta. The first or the second ever Hymn Society conference I attended was in Atlanta about 40 years ago, and I hate to think about how young I was at that time. But I remember seeing such great folks there as Alice Parker and even F. Pratt Green, and I literally sat at his feet one evening in the lobby. He was sort of holding court and was just such a generous and gracious man, and we all ran out of chairs, so we just sat down and sat on the floor and chatted with him. And I just remember reading with awe all the names on the name tags of the folks. So the conferences are wonderful. I hope you've all been to several and will again in the future. And but here we are, separated by hundreds of miles, which of course is a miracle in itself. And I'm thinking that's what hymns do too. They build bridges and they make connections, and they cross over the ages and generations and cultures and races and denominations. As you know, in most people's minds, hymns are both the text and the tune, and often hard to separate. Just recently, I heard a singer wax poetically of how John Newton was fitting his words an Amazing Grace to fit with that American tune, which of course he never ever heard. I remember hearing someone ask me once, saying, did Handel write Joy to the World before or after Messiah? Now that took a lot of explaining to make that work out. I once saw a children's curriculum that's showing both Charles Wesley and Isaac Watts at their keyboards writing their hymns. And we can chuckle, and of course we can educate when we can do so in a way that is helpful. But it really points to the reality that texts and tunes, when they are suited well for each other, form a union that is hard to break. And last evening, I listened to, perhaps some of you did too, the session led by John Horman on tunes, hymn tunes. And of course, some issues relating to texts came up. And I'm sure some issues relating to tunes will come up tonight, but we're going to try and stay focused on text. Some of the questions, I'll just mention them here, and hopefully at the end, after we've been over everyone's hymns, we'll have a chance to talk about this. But some people are so surprised there is such a thing as a hymn society, and that there are modern day hymn writers. I'm sure you'll run into these folks too. But you know, sometimes it's hard to explain, because with thousands of years of examples, hasn't everything already been said? Have you ever wondered about that yourself or been in that conversation? Our goal, of course, is often to say something new, even if it's about an old story or an old concept. We also are addressing topics our ancestors never imagined, situations that they never imagined. We are writing hymns that dare to name issues that are controversial and even embarrassing. And yet we have hymnody that is there to meet us and to help us express what we need. So one of the things I want to hear from each one of you as we get to your hymns. So here's a little head start. What makes you want to write, or what made you starting to want to write hymn texts? And what motivates you to write your texts? And maybe of the hymns that we have, your examples here tonight, point out maybe there's a single word or a phrase or a rhyme of which you are especially proud, as you should be. Are there some spots that still trouble you? We can get some feedback on that. I'll also ask if there's a particular tune you had in mind with your text, either while you were writing it or later. And so I want each of you to talk about that a bit when we come to your text. And we have 4 that we're going to share and discuss this evening, so I want to get to those right away. For each of these, I would like the author to read through it, first of all, even though we have it, we'll have it online up on the screen, I believe. But if each of these people would read it, and I think that could teach us a lot about their intentions for word emphasis and such things as that. And the one I just had here in the top of my pile was Larry Schultz, Spirit of God, Spark of Creation. So are you willing to start with us tonight? Okay, you're muted right now. Okay, and if you would read it for us, and then we'll start talking about it.
All right. Spirit of God, spark of creation, glowing in all, burning and bright, fire on the mountain and flame on the altar, pillar ablaze to illumine the night, light of the presence divine, Spirit, renew us and shine. Deeply within, seemingly silent, working unseen, life-giving source, particles vibrating, pulsing, expanding, spreading the universe, powerful force, active in all and alive. Spirit, renew us and thrive. Whispering voice, inner discernment for every choice, thoughtful and clear, channel of wisdom, conveyor of feeling, from the beginning the word that we hear, inwardly speaking to all. Spirit, renew us and call. Always beside, constant companion, going before, guarding behind, ever surrounding, supporting, inspiring, urging us forward to seek and to find, comforting friend at our side. Spirit, renew us and guide. Breath on the wind, swift and refreshing, stirring within daughter and son, filling the young and the old with new visions, dreams of a world where all people are one. Human division to mend. Spirit, renew us and send.
Great. We could applaud, I think, at this point. We would. Very effective. But tell us, what's your motivation for putting these words together?
A hymn contest, as is which I love, and I've started one in my congregation because, like we hear with in your bio, they're often the inspiration or a way to get started writing. And this was initially a hymn contest entry many years ago, and I've sort of lived with the text for a while. But the subject was renewal. And so I immediately thought of spirit when I thought of the word renewal. And so that was my motivation.
Okay. Good, good. Um, some of the things that I noticed in here, it's a very unusual meter. It works, but do you have a tune? Did you have a tune in mind? Is there a tune already, or have you come up with one since?
Yes, I'm actually first a composer, I think, in my own mind, and that's my educational background, and perhaps second a text writer. So yes, I've created one that has a sort of a triple feel
Yeah.
that works. Hmm.
I think what's so interesting on this one, it's very compact. If we look at the first four lines of each stanza, we don't find any complete sentences in there. Now, there was a time in hymnody where that would be completely forbidden, or said that was a real tragedy or a real oversight. And complete sentences still work awfully well. But at the same time, well, we've seen hymns gone beyond that. Although if you stick with it, once you get to the last, what I think of as the refrain,
Hmm.
Spirit renew us and shine, it does eventually become make a complete sentence. But all of this piling on of the imagery, these short phrases, and I could tell in the way you were reading it too. It's similar to the way I was reading it in my mind and out loud. It keeps driving forward to that end.
Yes.
And I see a lot of nodding heads there too. I think that you sense that too, that it happened. The rhyme scheme is consistent, but certainly not predictable at all. I found A B C B D D. So we have many hymns anymore that don't necessarily rhyme even, but this one has that rhyme scheme that works for all the stanzas. Um, I would like to hear from some of the others here on the panel, your reactions to this, and then I'll come back with maybe a few thoughts. Any of our other panelists want to mention something?
Always good to have a text dealing with the spirit. It's one of the lesser texts, I guess, less frequently found in our hymnals. So I appreciated that. It's always good to have another one of those.
I found it absolutely beautiful, and it reminded me very much of some of the best things that Brian Wren has done.
Well,
That's high praise. Yeah.
he's certainly an idol of mine. So yeah, thank you. Well, I probably stole the word mend from him. He has several hymn texts that speak of mending things, and I don't think that was in the forefront of my mind before some of his texts.
Any other comments from anyone?
I'm curious how I guess I had a desire, and a part of not just the hymn contest, but then as I wrote it, to either combine or maybe juxtapose a bit some ideas of certainly from Judeo-Christian story, myth, symbolism with scientific reality as well, of course, and mostly in the first two or three stanzas there. But don't know if that hit anybody, came to anybody's forefront.
Okay. When do you see this being used? What occasion, seasons tied in with a particular scripture reading?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yes, I often think of it as Pentecost hymn. All of the imageries with the Spirit, it sort of begins in the first stanza with the Hebrew scriptures, the fire on the mountain, the pillar, the flame on the altar of the tabernacle, and then by the final stanza, we've progressed through other imageries and ending with Pentecost,
Book
the
of Acts.
fire, the wind and breath.
Yeah.
And this kind of scriptural allusions there from that narrative. I've also used it single stanzas throughout a worship. So there are several progressive things. I've used it in a worship service in individual stanzas. I think the first one can praisefully open worship, and the second one gives us an awareness of presence literally in all. It's very much a pantheistic kind of text, that the Spirit resides literally in and through humanity, but creation, and that the two are not separate. And stanza 3 relates to prayer. Stanza 4, the seeking and finding, could be liturgically used around word and response, and the fifth as a sending out. So it sort of has a somewhat of a worship progression, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. So your congregation has sung this with your tune?
We have tried it out. Yes, we have, and complete with descant on the end to let the surprising spirit of Pentecost come. So
yeah,
that's so cool.
Knowing that you write text and tunes, what is your practice, your discipline for doing that? Write them together, one before the other?
Yes, typically I do text first, though on a couple occasions I'm trying to try the Mel Bringle approach of of getting a tune first and then seeing what text comes. But for me, it's typically been text first and then what music that calls forth. Yeah,
I have to say the same thing. I even though I have snippets of tunes going through my head, I say get away from me for the time being, because I don't want the tune to just use filler words and stuff. Yeah. So that's a bit of a challenge.
I find it very fulfilling, though, to be able to try both. I feel like I have to work very hard at the text first, but then as a composer, to be able to shape tune or whatever. Yeah.
I know quite a few folks who like you and like me, and maybe there's others on our panel too, who do write both text and tunes. But one of them I know in particular, he refuses to write music for his own text or write text for his own music. For that very purpose, he's afraid of what can happen. I guess I'm not that afraid of it, but I have done some of each, of course, doing that. One thing I wanted to point out in here is the use of the word all, A-L-L, happens there in the second line of the first stanza, happens in the refrain of the second, the end of the refrain of the third stanza. I think I find myself too, all is kind of a tricky word. It kind of gets stuck in your throat. And also, as far as meaning, I think it's kind of hard to make it stand as a noun. I think I like your use of it in the very last stanza, all people, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, when we're dealing with rhythms and syllables and the like, it's sometimes hurt that. But that's what struck me at the very beginning. Spirit of God, spark of creation, glowing in all. Maybe, not quite specific enough, perhaps, in there. I don't know, is that anything that you have been concerned about, or?
Good point. Yeah, I think I've been away from this text for a while, so I think so. I think I want to go back and give that some further thought. And it's probably I serve probably the most liberal Baptist church in the South as far as very much a social justice. So we're using the word all the time, and it's probably that's a great suggestion. There could be
that is a challenge, right? Because how much easier it would be to use non-inclusive language at times, but it's a principle that I don't waver from anymore. I always want to use it as inclusive as possible. Any other comments from anyone else before we move on?
One thing I wanted to say is that I loved seeing what word you were going to put in the last line. So I liked seeing the rhythm of, Spirit renew us, and I was like, oh, what's going to be next? So that was really fun to kind of be waiting for that. And then the only encouragement I might think of is like in constant companion, I'm assuming you're referencing the divine. And so sometimes I noticed that you would capitalize it and sometimes things were not capitalized. Mm-hmm. So maybe just kind of looking at that, if there were things that you wanted to be clear about. But I loved a lot of the imagery. Channel of wisdom. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so there was just a lot of really cool things to look in that. So thank you.
I'm glad.
I'd love to hear it.
Well, I've got it right here. I'm glad you said that because each stanza has one capitalized image that relates to the stanza. And I have also wondered, just one, others could be capitalized. Does that stand out as helpful or is it better to not do that?
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
I think there's, thank you. No, go ahead. It's good.
I'm sorry. I was going to make sure we have enough time for everyone, but there's just so much there that could be unpacked. So it's one of those texts I think we could say is dense in a good way. Generally that usually calls for a tune that's maybe a little simpler because, as again, my good friend John Horman points out, you don't want to put complex tunes and complex text together. And if you want to share the tune, I'd love to see it sometime.
I would be glad to. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, why don't we move on? I have Judy Tyler next here. And unless you don't want to go next.
No, it's fine. It's good. I'll get it over with.
Okay. Well, I think I know why we have two different versions here because I was part of the same contest. And of course, our first panelist here mentioned writing for contests. And I say, do it because there's a deadline, there's a topic. Those are the things. And most of mine have never gone anywhere, but now I have these texts, part of the skill. So would you tell us a little bit of why there's two very closely related versions here?
So it was for a contest that the Association of Lutheran Church Musicians had done. And again, I just, it's helpful to write towards a goal, even if, and so I decided to submit it just to get feedback. I was excited that our congregation got to sing it. And we sang it. We were doing a series on creation. And so, and it was really cool. People in our congregation were building like a mobile that was over the altar area. And so it had sea animals and then the storm and then the cosmos. And so, so that's kind of why the verses are the way they are.
I could have mentioned too, the Association with the Church Musicians specifically. These are two tunes, Seward and Devils, one by Theodore Beck, the other by Mark Cedio, and they appear with Christ Upon the Mountain Peak, which has a unique meter to it. But they felt a lot of these hymns weren't often being sung because they would only be appropriate once a year, and people would not know these tunes, and hence they weren't getting sung. So there was a contest funded by the Robbie family to come up with new texts for these tunes, then in the hopes that these tunes would become better known and could be sung. And Seward and Devils have a slightly different number of syllables at the end. I think it had to do with an Alleluia. So Judy, if you would read for us, why don't you just read us for the one on the right? I believe the only difference is the word anew at the end of each.
Right. Okay.
So why don't you read for us the one on the right?
Okay. So God, Creator, made the waters, full of wonder, full of beauty, now to live in harmony, sanctuary shared together, teach us how to care anew. God incarnate, heaven granted, flesh and blood, God's love within, we with creatures one as kin, sheltered on this single planet, teach us how to care anew, or share anew. God the Spirit, who is present in this still or raging storm, breathes into the church reform, ever faithful, never absent, teach us how to trust anew. God the Triune, cosmic wonder, full of power, stirring awe, even if our view is small, Let us rest in you to ponder. Teach us how to see anew.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, again, creator, incarnate, spirit, triune, good, strong Trinitarian patterns there that we can see. So we know the part of the motivation for your writing this was that contest that we've already talked about. But what took you in this direction, this topic?
I think the topic was that I knew I might never, hear this ever sung anywhere. And so I knew that at my church, because of this time we were concentrating on creation, that I would probably be able to get the music. I'm not the music director. I'm a social worker. And so I knew that he would probably, let us sing this. So, and I love hearing people sing. I love congregational song. And so I wanted to hear people sing it. So I thought I should do something that might be tied to that. So,
well, these what topics, I guess, or what themes, readings do you find this especially appropriate for that you'd help illuminate?
You mean like in what places would it be appropriate to sing, kind of thing? Mm-hmm. I think if a congregation was doing work around creation, if they were looking at stewardship and what does that mean, to be partners with God in caring for creation. And so that's sort of what I was thinking it might be useful for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe during ordinary time,
I see you, the social worker, especially there in number 2. We with creatures, one as kin, sheltered on this single planet, teach us how to share anew, right?
Mm-hmm. That does sound very social worker.
Yeah, it is. And I think I see with all of these, they aren't just all the texts we're looking at today. They're not just satisfied with kind of the same old, even if they're saying them in different ways, right? These are the things I think we have this need for. The hymns of praise are never inappropriate, but to have things that are this focused, I think is really good. Anyone surprised to see the word sanctuary show up? We're often taught stay away from words longer than 3 or certainly 4 syllables in there, but yet I think it works. Of course, that's kind of a loaded term these days. Sanctuary cities, sanctuary churches, with all the legalities of that.
Right.
But here,
right.
I think you used it well. I was wondering if anyone else had a reaction to that phrase. And then, folks, this is a panel. No, it's. I think it works together. Sanctuary shared together. So I guess it isn't just sanctuary aloneness, right? But it's the togetherness of that I appreciate with that. The verse number stanza number 3. My mind, when I was reading this, did a little bit of a hitch on second line, in the still or raging storm. I came to that and I thought, I thought of it first as an adjective. Is there a still storm? But then I thought, no, still is also a noun, right? A sense of being still. Is that how you imagined it there? Right?
Yeah. And I think I also was wrestling with, because again, at church, we were doing the storm was the third Sunday. I was thinking about the people like in the Midwest for whom thinking of a storm was not comforting. A tornado might have destroyed their home or, it would, and I just also thought about that God was present in that. I mean, I don't believe in my theology, not causing the storm or causing the destruction, but if someone's looking at the destruction that's left or waiting for it to come or in a hurricane or those kind of things. So, I was kind of wrestling with that because again, the third Sunday was on storm. So I had to do storm. So.
Well, I think it's great if we can talk about the lines that caused us some difficulty. You know, we all know those the times that keep us up at night and go over it and over it in our head until we'll saying no more, right? And then we're just used to it, and we can't be judge it very evenly anymore because we just know it as being familiar.
Right.
I had a little bit of a hitch too in the first stanza. God Creator made the waters full of wonder, full of beauty, and now to live in harmony. I was wondering if that maybe could be connected a little bit differently. Because it's the waters that I'm thinking of as are full of beauty and full of wonder, as they certainly are. But then it says, now to live in harmony. I was a little confused by that flow, I could say, right?
Okay.
I think that works really well with the sanctuary shared together, teach us how to care anew. So a little bit of a leap in there, perhaps. All I'm saying is how it affected me. And feel free to ignore anything that I say tonight because, you know, you're the ones that have lived with these, and they're so full of wonderful things. But that's something that we can do. I hope all of you have someone that you can share your text from time to time and tunes, just to get that other eye or ear in there saying, oh, I never thought that word could be taken differently. You know?
Right.
So I can't see all of us at once, but I really love it. And there are two words in the fourth verse that sort of struck me as maybe being up for a little discernment. And in one case, an alternate word occurred to me. In the other case, one didn't, but it's sort of a live question for me. So the line, even if our view is small, I found myself kind of wanting it to be even when our view is small. Not necessarily out of the poetry, but and I'm way, way, way on the liberal progressive end of all of this. So I'm not saying this out of a particularly conservative or sin-driven theology, but sometimes our views are small. So that occurred to me as a tiny thing, obviously only if you liked it. I mean, I think it works fine as it is. And then because I have recently been redoing my whole catalog to deal with unintentionally ableist language, even though I hesitate a little bit to bring this up, and certainly I've been very defensive about it in my own work. But the word see, you know, there's some people might find that less than ideal. Not that it doesn't work. It, to me, simply raises a question of, is that something that you wish to wrestle with? And if it is, I'd invite you to wrestle. And if it's not, I'd invite you to leave it.
No, but yeah, there might be another word that could have the same meaning.
There are so many things that can come to play on these, as we all know, to make sure we are not using trigger words or things that can be seen as offensive to someone or seem to be excluding, you know, at all. I like that line, even if our view is small. I know sometimes you talk about somebody, oh, their world is too small, you know, but that might not work out too. Your rhyme scheme, I thought that it isn't always exact, but it doesn't have to be, but it's pretty much an A, B, B, A, and then C, that last line. I saw one of the chats probably you're watching that shows up, someone said that packs a wallop each time, teach us something, right? So this really is a prayer and a pleading, which is fine. Okay, last call for any comments on Judy's hymn text.
And thank you.
Well, congratulations. Yeah.
Thanks. And thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Great. Let's go on to Drew Baer. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And Drew sent this to me, first of all, with the music, and which I appreciated, but I thought for us to look at it here, I asked him if he would send it to me just written out as poetry. And he even went to the point of including hyphens in there, which is a big help. Half of when we're writing music, or text into music, spend half the time in my dictionary saying, how do I divide this word? So thanks for doing that for us. Would you go ahead and read this for us?
Yes. This morning I woke up and saw the light of day. Did it cross my mind who made the sun to rise? And then I drank a cup of cool, clean water. Did I think to lift my praise to the giver of rain? Lord, I confess my ingratitude and my presumptuousness. Truly you spoke that you provide for the ungrateful, overlooked mercies every day. This is an injustice and a tragedy. You give a window for to see into your heart, but we fall in love with the window instead. We ask for stained glass, but when you do refuse, we complain that you aren't listening to our prayers. Lord, we repent of our ingratitude and our presumptuousness. Truly you spoke that you provide for the ungrateful, overlooked mercies every day. This is an injustice and a tragedy. Now every puff of wind reminds me you are here, and the old tall trees teach me to wait with you. And every flower testifies that you are kind, and all my bread reminds me of your death. Lord, I request eyes to see and lips to bless. Truly you spoke that you provide for the ungrateful, overlooked mercies every day. This is an injustice and a tragedy. Thank you.
And thank you. I think it's the first time I've ever seen the word presumptuousness in a hymn or a song of any type. Four, it couldn't even be done with 5 syllables, but with 4. And of course, people have pointed out, I have an anthem with some 4 and 5 stanza words in it too. So even though that's a sort of has been a rule in the past, we can find it working and not being limited in that respect. So I think it's a very personal point of view, right? Do you think it could be sung by a group of people? That's always been a long discussion among hymnody. If it's too I-oriented, is it too individualistic that it could be used in worship? And we're not saying that all of this has to be used in corporate worship. So that's why I'm just asking that.
Yeah, the I versus we question is something I think about a lot. And often it bothers me, at least in the traditions that I've been in. Like, I'm going to college right now, so in campus worship, how much we sing I, because we don't get together to sing as I, we get together to sing as we. So that's why I tried to work in we on one of the refrains, because I do believe it's not just a personal problem. I think we all need to confess this, as a lot of people. You noticed humans in general, we tend to overlook God's graciousness in many cases, but it does come from a personal, confessional place.
Oh, it's very personal, yeah.
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah. So was there a particular occasion, event, or use that you have in mind for this? Or?
No, not really a particular use. The church tradition I come from does not have a very structured liturgy, so I don't usually think in terms of that very much. No, not really.
Okay. Maybe some others could suggest, do you have some times when you think, occasions that that this would be just the right text that we'd want to help us?
I don't really know. I'd love to hear others' thoughts.
Yeah, if anyone else has some thoughts on that. We can come back to that if no one has any thoughts. A couple of things I wanted to see what you had in mind here. I found a little confusing. I think most of it's very heartfelt, and it's easy to join in the sentiments here. We ask for stained glass, and when you do refuse. I'm a little confused by that phrase.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, there's some awkwardness in the language in those 4 lines. when you do refuse, and also for to see into your heart. It's kind of awkward language, and that's because I was making it fit with music. I don't have very much experience songwriting, but in the past, the couple songs I have done, I always did the text and made sure the text is good and then did the music. And then on this one, I kind of did them at the same time and cheated. And so that's the fruit of that. That's where the problem comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's a problem. I was just asking what you had in mind for that. We asked for stained glass. I don't know what that means.
Oh, sorry. So just on a conceptual sort of standpoint, what I'm talking about. Okay. So you give a window for it to see into your heart. Yeah. Basically, everything God gives us is intended by him for us to see him through it. Mm-hmm. But we fall in love with the stuff he gives us instead. Okay. And stained glass, I intend that image to mean something that he gives us, or that we want him to give us, rather, that is more glorious than what we already have. Yeah. But from God's perspective, he understands it would just make us see him less clearly, and that's why he says that. Okay, well, that helps me understand there what you have in mind. I'm going to ask about one more here. All my bread reminds me of your death. Is that a reference to Holy Communion? Kind of. Okay. So this last verse about basically, at this point, I've confessed, I've repented, and now I'm working on seeing God in everyday life. And so every time I eat, even if it's not Holy Communion, it makes me think about communion. Okay, of sacrifice and stuff. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of images in here, which is nice. Open it up for others, please, to ask similar things or point out wonderful things or question things in there. He's on mute. Oh, Judy, you want to say something?
Oh. Yeah, I have to say, I did love that you got the word presumptuousness in there. I thought that was, I just was like, that's rich. And then I really did like the line about, God giving us a window and then we fall in love with the window. So that was an interesting insight. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it struck out with me, which is why I really wanted to ask him what that meant. Does anyone, how does anyone feel about the ending? This is an injustice and a tragedy. It's good that we're able to talk about such things as human shortcomings and the like. At the very ending, this is an injustice and a tragedy, and then adding on a thank you. I'm wondering if that's the best ending. Could you make it maybe a little more positive, or at least hopeful, or turn it into a prayer of some sort, or something? Otherwise, it just sort of ends where it began.
Yeah, I agree. That's not the best.
Yeah.
But I like the way you addressed our problems and our shortcomings in here, because that needs to be done for sure.
Right. I kind of felt the last line too. I loved the overlooked mercies every day, because it just was really a reminder of those are overlooked. And I might kind of sit with that last line a little bit and see what might also percolate that gives both law and grace, but it was interesting imagery. So.
Absolutely. I think what others have mentioned, and also what Drew mentioned here, was thinking of things as a work in progress, sitting with them, living with them for a while, until we come and struggling with it. Really, it's kind of like any type of writing. We rework our sentences, and I think I do that 20 times more for poetry, lyrics, hymn writing than for any of the prose and other things that I might be writing. So is this really the best way? We come up with I often tell my composition students, I want you to come back with 4 different ways you can go from this point in this piece of music. You may come back to the one that you thought of first, but you won't know that that's the best way until you've tried, the alternate. So, to keep going back, you might come back to the original way eventually, but then you'll feel more solid about that. So, I think there's a lot of good things here, and I hope you'll keep working with it and other things too.
Thank you. I will.
Any other comments? Okay. Or Drew? Okay. Well, let's move on to John Melick. Is that right? Melick?
Melik, actually.
Melik. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. It says a date here of 2019, so this is new. Or other new.
Yes.
So, do you want to? Anything else you want to say, or just want to head right in and read it for us?
I can just read it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. All our hope will soon be gone. Daily toil and daily hunger, desperation, now our song. Sinful systems make us suffer, so our lives are filled with fear. We turn to the weeping Savior who has shared our every tear. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Now your children go unfed. Others turn their faces, shameful that they do not share their bread. Give us strength, give us courage to resist the web of might that would make us prize our profit over every human plight. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Stir in us the prophet's wrath for the powers and institutions that have blocked our common path. When we join you in the market, turning tables in disgust, then we know the Spirit's urging toward the world you dream for us.
Okay, again, lots of intensity in that, right? A lot of powerful images and words and action words in that. When I first looked at it and I started counting up, I go, wow, this is 15, 15, 15, 15. That's a long meter. And then I realized it could have been written out really as 8787D. There's the Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, all our hope will soon be gone. So it would fit a lot of a common tune. Have you had a tune in mind with this one, or?
I started writing it. I wrote like the first couple lines, and then I had in my mind Beecher, which, as I was writing it, but I don't think that works for it. It's supposed to be more of a lament. Beach Spring was another thought, but that's probably not right either. So at some point, I'm going to try to write the tune for it as well.
Well, if you think of it as 8787D, which it does fit very well, you have a wealth of tunes, but there's still tunes to be written with that. But since there is sort of a break in the midst of most of these phrases, it could be sung to a tune like that, Hippolyte, even something like that. It really is a strong call to action. Poetically, it's very consistent. That's why I think it would sing very well. The rhymes, I feel like, are quite good. What's an occasion, or what's your motivation for it? And did you have a occasion where you think it could be useful, or have you used it?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I wrote it last year. I was finishing up my MDiv degree and doing my project was on basically economic justice issues in worship, and I wanted to. What I was finding was there weren't a lot of songs for lament around economic justice issues, and so I wrote it as for that, and certainly would work with scripture texts dealing with the prophets or multiple things from the Gospels as well. It references a couple things in there too from scripture. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a call to action. Social gospel comes through strong and clear. Even protest, turning tables in disgust. There we have a strong biblical image, but I've been seeing so many things about that lately. About when people are upset at protesters, saying Jesus did a lot of that too.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't pussyfoot around at all, does it? I mean, it's a very bold. It's very bold and very strong. I think. I was wondering that opening. I love the use of "Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy," puts it right in the context of the Kyrie eleison. All our hope will soon be gone. I was wondering that at the very beginning of that line. Sometimes, when we write or find a hymn that's just right for a specific occasion, if it gets too specific, we find it can't really be used elsewhere because it was almost a one-time use piece. I don't think this is the case. But what is that referring to, and could it be useful in other places, I guess, other times, other occasions? What does that mean? All our hope can be gone.
Yeah. So that when I was writing my project, one of the books I used was called "Embracing Hopelessness" by Miguel de la Torre, and so that was just kind of rattling around in my brain all last year. And kind of what he argues for is not giving false hope to people. The idea that, there'll be pie in the sky when we die, but rather like embracing hopelessness in the sense of like a desperation that pushes us to resist injustice in really powerful ways. So that's kind of where it was coming from. And yeah, it's definitely it could be a polarizing statement. So
yeah. Well, I think it just calls the question, especially if we're looking at, is this going to be a corporate voice? Could a group getting together Saturday or Sunday worship, sing this, or is it only for an occasion that's so specific when we are sensing all hope will soon be gone? It's a phrase you might want to revisit to see if you could come up with something that is just as powerful, but might be a little more, I hate to use the word universal, but a little more wider, carry a little more wider use, I guess. A little bit more.
That makes sense.
Even on the second line, daily toil and daily hunger, desperation now our song. It seems to be pointing to some specific event, and that's what made me wonder. The last line of that first stanza, "We turn to the weeping Savior." I thought there the rhythm scheme didn't quite work out the same. And I also thought of going back to it, that can sound a little awkward, but "turn we to the weeping Savior." I think it would fit. Depends on the tune, of course, but "we turn," that "turn we" might fit a little bit better rhythmically.
Okay.
And something like that. On the second stanza, second line, "Others turn their faces, shameful that they do not share their bread." That's something I've never heard sung about before. The shame of doing that. But I wonder if it's maybe a little accusatory. Should we say, do they? Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people do share their bread, and maybe we should make it more about us. Now your children go unfed. Often we turn our faces, something like that. If it was more of a, otherwise it sounds to me a little more accusatory, I guess.
I'm still tinkering with that line. I don't really.
Oh yeah, we should always be tinkering. even after things get in print, sometimes we want to keep tinkering, as we all know. It's kind of like doing a master's thesis and then a doctoral dissertation. The motto was, how we encouraged each other was like, it does not have to be in the finished condition, it just has to be in a finished condition.
Yes.
But when something's going to get put into print, even if it's in a bulletin or something like that for our own use, we want it to be as good as possible. But we can keep going on and editing. Someone mentioned earlier Brian Wren. We know that he keeps making changes to hymns even after they long appear in hymn books. If you're going to reprint one, you have to make sure you put in the one that he currently is in favor of at that point. a phrase that I loved in here was the web of might, to resist the web of might. To me, that was powerful enough, but also wide enough that it could refer to a whole bunch of many different things, whether we're talking about systematic racism, anything that would fit that's complex, I guess, that web of might. I don't know if that jumped out to anyone else. And the last thing I wanted to mention was, when we go that very last line again, I like how it turns upward, turns into hope. It doesn't gloss over it, but it ends with some hopefulness. It says, "Then we know the Spirit's urging toward the world you dream for us," which is a wonderful sentiment, I think, on which to end. But it got me wondering, can we really know the Spirit's urging, or do we sense it, feel it? Can you know an urging, or, just something else to think about in there? I first thought of the word feel, and I thought, no, that gets a little bit questionable too, because too many people's religion is just what they feel at that moment, but it's sensing the Spirit's urging, or something like that, those are all possibilities. So enough of me talking. I would like to hear from some of the others. What's the impact this hymn has on you, or any other strong points you want to point out, things you want to question?
Before I saw the bottom line with your name and date, I just assumed you did this a couple of weeks ago as far as the subject matter, and I thought how timely the text is, and calling us to really think about our systems. I love the line in the first. I love the alliteration of "sinful systems make us suffer." I love that.
Yeah.
So our lives are filled with fear.
Yes, so, I can already hear all the S's in the congregation happening.
Yeah.
No, but that's good. I mean,
that
that's
really works well.
That's what is that called? Assimilance? I may not have the right term, but where the sounds
alliteration.
Well, it's that, but where the sounds of the syllables become a part, and just sinful systems is
right.
I think it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Larry's comment, that it seems so recent, and isn't that a wonderful goal? We can find hymns that are hundreds of years old and are relevant, and that's what we, of course, like to aim for. Things that come from maybe a specific inspiration, specific event, condition, but are broad enough to do that. I've often run into that problem sometimes with churches that want to do anniversary hymns. And they said, oh, you have to mention, the year that this building was built and all that and the other. And it says, okay, but you're going to come up with a hymn that's only usable by your church on this anniversary. As opposed to Riverside's church, God of Grace and God of Glory. That was written for either the dedication or anniversary or something. And it spoke to that place, but it was much broader than that. And that's helpful to be a goal. Not that everything needs to do that, especially things that if we have choral anthems and solos and the like. But when we have hymns that get too specific, then we know that they're quite limited, in their use. Any other comments on this one?
I just want to say, I wondered if you considered any questioning lines, like when I got to the end of the first stanza, "We turn to the weeping Savior." For some reason, I almost thought maybe a question: will we something the weeping Savior who has shared every tear? Question mark. I don't know if you had ever considered any questions in here.
I like questions.
Yeah. Leave people trying to fill in the blanks instead of trying to. I guess that same kind of thing I had in mind when I said, then we know the Spirit's urging. If it left a little bit open there for the imagination. So, back when you talked about the tunes with this, I love the tune Beecher. Actually, I was not successful in getting it into the evangelical Lutheran worship. But again, it is a pretty jolly, rollicking type of a tune. And I agree, this would not be the setting for that. Something like Beach Spring would probably work, although nowadays I think every other hymn is written with Beach Spring. It's a great tune, I'm so glad we have that for us. But for some of these more usable, well-used meters, that's always the challenge to do that. So, but again, a tune that would catch the intensity, I guess, the seriousness of it, without being too complex, because again, we have a very complex, intricate text here. So, any other comments on that? Yeah. Those are all the ones that I have. The tune group that met last night, they had 11 that they tried to cover. So I was so glad we didn't have quite that many, but I think it leaves us more time to talk about some of these things I mentioned earlier. We can go until 8:15, I believe, right, Stephen? Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned something earlier. With all these examples that we have, and we know that what we call the hymn explosion, starting in the 1960s, has never stopped, right? If anything, it's kept growing, which is wonderful. Yet there are people who still think there are no modern hymns being written. That's kind of confusing and disturbing at times. But with thousands of years of examples, hasn't everything already been said? Well, I think we've seen from a lot of our examples tonight that there are a lot of things that still can be said. New directions, new topics to talk about. But how do we go about doing this? Saying something new, even if it's an old story or an old concept, or how do we address topics that our ancestors never imagined would even be situations in life? How do we write issues, naming them that are controversial and perhaps even embarrassing? And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts you can share with us as you have worked your way into becoming hymn writers. Everyone's thoughtful. I could play the Jeopardy theme here.
How about fresh, different God imagery or descriptions of the divine rather than that
Lord.
we see from history? Yeah, right. Maybe something other than Lord.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
because I think that opens up our imaginations and.
Right. And it's been so wonderful these last few decades finding new names for God, for the divine, that are actually still scriptural too, which is we find how limited our language has been. But also, I think we saw this in some of the examples of the hymns today. Some of the ways of addressing God are talking about what God does, right? They're action. We talk about action verbs. These are action nouns, action names, talking about what the Spirit does, what God does. And I think those are helpful ways. And I don't think there's any way of running out of those types of images.
I actually, I have a hymn called God the Soaring Eagle that uses probably between 20 and 30 images from across the Hebrew Bible and New Testament.
Yeah.
And shifts around a lot and plays with gender and sort of specifically tries to break through some gender binaries. So I mentioned that because it occurred to me as you were talking.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a growing edge as to moving beyond that first level of inclusive language, which is just trying to not refer to all humanity using male images, and then trying to get rid of over and over using just male imagery for God. And now we're going on into, as Amanda mentioned, even things that just embrace humanity, no matter where they are on their journey in life. Yeah, Judy. Judy's still muted. Judy is still muted. And Judy,
Mute.
there she is. Okay.
There I am. Yay.
There you are.
So I get to hang out with a group called Arizona Songwriters, which is really fun, and they bring all sorts of music. But a lot of times they don't know what to do when I bring hymns. So I'm so appreciative. I'm so appreciative. And they listen to me, but they're like, oh, I'm not really sure what that's about. But one of the things they talk about is in songwriting, they talk about having it pass the telephone, having it pass the telephone test, that you read through it and it makes sense. But in hymns, like I was noticing you were juxtaposing some words and things like that. Are there just different rules about that? Or I'd like to learn the craft. And then I know people break the craft or rules, but any words of wisdom on that?
Well, maybe some others have some things to say too, but working in an academic setting, of course, we're often have to bring forward the things, our projects and our publications and the like. And some of my really close friends in the English department are published poets. And when they know that I am too, we want to share some things. And some of them are active in churches and some are not. But it's what we do as hymn writers doesn't quite fit the same when people are reading some of their other poems and they go, oh, it has rhymes. They don't say this, but oh, it has the same rhythm. Each verse has the same rhythm, each stanza. And I remember not too long ago, I was in a conversation about people saying, no, you're not a poet, you're a lyricist. And I think that's where it comes down to it. Whenever I had a chance to read my some of my hymn text or anthem text, but I often write my anthem text like hymn text, actually. I like that form, restrictions on it. I often say, now it might sound more like a Hallmark card when I read it, but when it's sung, it's going to make more sense, So I feel like I sort of have to apologetically put in that little caveat. So, but even those folks understand the difference, when you're writing lyrics to be sung. So I think the poets, lyricists, hymn writers, it's sort of a Venn diagram where we have some of our separate areas, but we certainly have a lot of common things in there. So do you have other experience, comments you're going to make in that respect? Watching the time here. An interesting question on this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good point. But to the point where, often we are thinking in rhymes and rhythms and stuff. Sometimes it's hard to break out of that. Because when you're writing, if you're writing just a text to be read or aloud or just to someone else, or if you're writing lyrics, let's say, to a choir anthem or certainly vocal solo, you don't have to be as strict about the numbers of syllables and the like as we do when we're doing hymns, standing up to the repetition of being able to sing the same text to the same tune, different text to the same tune many times. So it's hard to describe it and not make it sound boring to other writers. But we know the truth. So that ours takes even greater skill. It's like, I know what I want to say here, but I only have 2 syllables to say it. Well, if you're not going to sing it, you can take as many syllables as you want, right? And I know what I want to say here, but I really want this to rhyme because I set up this rhyme scheme in stanza 1. Now I want to do it in stanza 2. So I think we often have even more restrictions on what it is that we do. I think that makes the struggle a little more intense. Again, as I mentioned, the sleepless nights sometimes, the phrase that just won't bug us, but that will bug us. And wrestling, think of us as being more like Jacob, so we wrestle with these concepts. How do I get this concept? How do I get this message out there? And as I'm sure you've discovered, when that finally, the light bulb finally comes on, that's a great joy. It makes it all worth it, to me anyway. So as we struggle and spend time with that. Well, I think we're about up with our time here. So again, I want to say just congratulations and thank you for sharing your works, opening yourself up for critiques, helpful and otherwise I hope we've been helpful for each other. So I will encourage you to, again, keep writing. The more we write, the more we improve. The world needs your voice. It needs our voice. For what we would say. Not many people are writing about the things that hymn writers are writing about these days, in ways that can be shared as well, especially if you can get these sung in corporate worship. As we all do, I encourage you to study hymns by others. I know I can get too occupied in something I'm writing, and then all of a sudden I'll admire something on a hymn or a choral anthem that we're doing that Sunday, and look at them and say, why does this work? What was Wesley doing so wonderfully here? What did Fanny Crosby do that's such a wise choice here? You know, why are these working so well? We can often gain a lot even by looking at things that don't work. Saying, okay, what's wrong here? Why does this not sing very well? Well, you know, the rhythm's off. There's a syllable missing. Something else should have been done here. And of course, live with these texts as we do. Let them lie in sketches for as long as they need to do. And the things that I've done during the quarantine, I was already on sabbatical the spring semester, and so I was going through stuff to get rid of things, and I found things that I had worked on 40 years ago, and I went back and worked with them. I had to replace a lot of stuff. I kind of looked at it and saying, oh, wasn't that cute that I did back 30, 40 years ago? But I found some pretty good ideas and worked with them. And you come back with them with new eyes, almost as if someone else is giving you some critique. They need to germinate and grow. Set them aside and come back later. So, and then most important, to rejoice in that sense of creativity that you have been given. We know that it's talent and hard work. I think we always have people who talk to musicians especially, and writers, and say, oh, you're so talented. I wish I had such talent. And we often either bite our tongue and don't say anything, or else I've started to say it now that I'm older. I can just keep my mind more off, and I'll say, I said, no, it's more hard work than it is talent. But people need to recognize that it's both, and we do too. We know that these don't just come, maybe a single phrase might come down in a beam of light from heaven, but even though we have to still struggle with that. So blessings on your work. It is a wonderful thanks to Hymn Society and Steve for guiding us so well tonight, helping me get back onto Zoom as we should have. I should have been a little bit earlier, but I'm glad we were able to make it. Any last words from anyone? I see a lot of smiling faces, which is wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your help.
Blessings.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night. Good night.